This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Stephanie Cotsirilos. And want to welcome you to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Keith?
Doing great. We like to podcast a lot. We've been busy today.
Good. I know.
And it's just fun to talk to people around the world. We've been on the air since 2016.
Wow.
This is actually episode 1176. We've been around for a bit.
Tremendous. Wow.
And we just like to, talk to people who we believe, creativity, and whether you're an influencer, whether you're an advocate or mentor, life coach, author, writer, actor, film director. I find the synthesis of creativity is in all human beings. So
That's
just try to tell people stories. So given that, one of the things I always ask every guest is, why do you do what you do? And what motivates you?
Great. Well, it's a wonderful question. And I'm fascinated that you've got this intersection in your own life among various things, the technology, the musicianship. Do you play an instrument, by the way, Keith?
Yeah, I'm like around all my synthesizers. I'm a keyboardist.
I see.
Yeah, I'm in my studio. And so that's why I got this kind of mic. But I've been into music since I was like 17. Started on the clarinet. Didn't realize I'd like singer-songwriters, so I learned to write on pianos and guitars, and I just got into instruments. And guys like Todd Rundgren and Prince were like it's like, oh God, if there are guys that can write the whole song, like if the band's not there, then I can write the whole song. So that's the way I pretty much write all my music and play all the instruments myself.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, my mother was this kind of sneaks into why do I do what I do. My mother loved music a great deal. And she was a big fan of Maria Callas, the opera singer. But I know that why I do what I do has something innate in it. And I don't know if you relate to this or not, but I loved music and dancing from the time I was a very little child. Mm-hmm. So that is just something I couldn't get away from. My mom told me that when I was a toddler, I kept spraining my ankles. And I must have had a really smart pediatrician, because he said to my mom, strengthen her ankles, get her into a dancing class, get her into ballet class. And I fell in love with it. So from there, we couldn't turn back. It was ballet and piano. So I played piano back when I was a small child. And I fell in love with films and Judy Garland back in those days.
Oh, yeah, I like old films. TCM, I watched TCM with Orson Welles and Bogart and all these silent films. I like the old craft. I like black and white because of the shadows.
Yes.
And the lighting.
Yes. Yeah.
And the scripts.
That's right. And The Wizard of Oz, of course, was that breakthrough film that gave us black and white, and then boom, color.
It's like that different type of color. It's not the color we have now.
No, I think it was Technicolor, but I'm not really sure.
It's a kind of a different vision for the color, kind of like a painting.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember seeing that as a small child because I was very aware of The Wizard of Oz when I was a little girl, and seeing that color just burst out at me. Apparently, it got to the point where people would ask me, "Hi, little girl, what's your name?" And I would say, "Judy Garland."
Judy. Everybody, you loved it.
Yeah, I loved her. Not quite a Greek name like my real one. So I'm kind of getting around to why I do what I do. There was something inspiring about music and dance and color and all those things, but I don't know if I can explain quite that there was something that had to do with resilience in all of those things. There's something in the spirit, in the human spirit, that responds to sound and movement, right? And here you are nodding at me because you understand, and color and music. And I remember thinking that that's where I wanted to live. In that place.
In the arts. Yeah. Well, there's a synthesis because, I think all the time in terms of sound paintings.
Yes.
People say, what does that mean? Like, being a synthesist, what we do is we create tones.
Yes,
we
you
create
do.
atmospheres.
Yep. Yes,
and I
we
create
do.
these I can build like something that sounds like an orchestral piece, and it's only me. But I
That's
can layer it like this big orchestra there.
that's right.
And you can make something sound like ocean waves or something, some cosmic thing
I know.
that you never heard before. And the idea of it is like, I love reading. I
Yeah.
love like romantic poets like Blake and Wordsworth and Tennyson. I just like the synthesis of all types of art, or
Yes.
it's fusion, jazz, or a punk rock band. It's like it doesn't matter. It's like from visual to painting to everything. And I think like if you're an artist, you take the inputs that you're getting from from the outside and the inside, right? If you're a writer, you world build, you
Yes, you
character
do.
design, and you're picking up the same things a musician does. Like my form might only go 4 minutes or 15 minutes. Your form might go 70,000 words, 200,000 words, but we're still like in that creative space trying to paint that world, right?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that gets you out of your ruts when you're writing something and it's just not happening right then. One of the places you go to, Keith, is stop the music, so to speak. What's happening for this character in the room? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What is the light like? And you go to the sensory input that's happening for that character or in that scene, and it will help you get out of where you're stuck and move you to a new place in writing, which can evoke those other things, but you got to do it through words. I'm not sure that you know that my first career was actually in the performing arts. So I was a singer and an actress. When I first graduated from undergraduate school, I went to the Yale Music School and got a degree in singing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So nothing that my Greek American family was too happy about. But
they weren't too juiced about that.
Yeah. But they supported me in going to school. But women didn't do that sort of thing back in the day in the Greek immigrant community. So that is actually part of the resilience that represented for me, is to do it anyway. Okay. I wasn't necessarily getting a lot of approval from certain corners of the family, but I knew this was something I had to do.
You had a vision, or you knew what you needed to learn or what you wanted to experience.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, there's like it's a typical path for the artist. Oh, that's nice, but how can you have a living with that? Right.
Right.
Everybody looks at it as like, what's your real job?
I know. What's your day job? Exactly. And there was another overlay, which has to do with resilience also in those days, of what it meant to be a woman, an honorable woman. Because I was close enough to my immigrant background that came into play. All four of my grandparents were born in Greece, and they came to the United States. My paternal grandmother did not know how to read or write. And that was because she was a woman, okay? There were many circumscribed elements to being a woman, at least on her side of the family and in her village. Her father forbade her, Keith, from going to school. Yeah, wow is right.
Well, that you can see that in cultures today in parts of the planet, where in Africa or the Middle East, you've got places that push people down like that. Even Eastern Europe, there are places that have that mindset. And it's disappointing, because I look at the capability of every human being, right?
Right.
And every human being has the ability to just shine and do all these things. And then you have these cultural limitations that will push down people of different like sexes and ages and whatever, and limit your potential. And to me, it's like human potential. We don't even use all of our brain.
No, small part of it.
Yeah.
Small part of it.
And when you start to actually access that creative spark.
Right.
And you have the permission structure. Like if you get the permission structure where you said, well, I'm going to do it. And you were allowed to at least do it. You weren't pushed down where you couldn't do it.
Right. Not like my grandmother, who was pushed down. The story according to one of her daughters, was that she had a book in her hand in the village in Greece where she was a child. And her father asked her what she thought she was doing. And she said, I'm getting ready to go to school. I'm going to go to school and learn to read. And apparently he took the book away from her. And he said, no, that's never happening. Can you imagine? See, I didn't even know this until I was 12 years old, that my grandmother could not read. My other grandparents either taught themselves or learned or went to school. But this is related to the subject of our podcast, which is love across culture, love across boundaries. Yeah. I had this big cultural gap with that particular grandmother in particular that I didn't even fully realize, except I knew that there was something that was always very different about us. She didn't speak English very well. It was very difficult to have conversations. And one day I remember being around 12, and I had called my grandmother to say hi, which I was very bad at doing, and she was mad at me for not calling more often. So I hung up the phone and I said to my mom, well, you know, she's so lonely. Why doesn't she read a book or something? And my mother looked at me and she said, you didn't know? She can't do that. She doesn't know how to read. Well, talk about an abyss that existed between us, between me and my grandmother. But she loved me dearly. She was a tough cookie. I'm here to tell you. This was not a squishy grandma. Okay. Yeah. At all. And oh my God, she wanted me to get married and find a husband. She even offered to buy me a husband.
Oh, wow. She was looking out for you.
Yeah, that's what she was. And you're allowed to laugh. But she said about a boyfriend of mine, she said, if he needs money, you know, if you want to marry him and he needs money, we'll give him money for that. I couldn't believe my ears. But there was the boundary between us. There was this cultural fissure between us. And it took me years to let go of being offended and to say, look, she was looking out for you. It's what you just said, Keith. Mm-hmm. She was expressing her love to you because she didn't think that you should be going through life unmarried. So this was the kind of thing that kind of infiltrated whether or not I was moving forward in the arts, and I did. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because it spoke so deeply to me about something that I couldn't deny. Mm-hmm. I did give it up and study law, by the way. So that was a change. But if I may I tell you why that happened?
Yeah, why that happened?
Yeah. I started seeing human resilience differently. I remember being in New York City. I'd been in a Broadway show with a dear friend of mine, and we were sitting on the sofa in New York watching rescue efforts for the Mexico City of 1985. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible earthquake.
Oh, that one. I remember that one.
Yeah. And there were rescue dogs like winding through the rubble and finding people alive. And their handlers would wait till the dog whined. And I looked at the TV and I said to my dear friend, you know what? I don't have a single skill that those people need. Not one. And the dogs are doing a better job than I could do in helping right now. It was a moment in my performing arts career when I realized that I didn't need to do it anymore. And so that was the beginning of my researching other ways of being with other people. And I was in law school within 18 months after that. So I came back to the arts, but that's kind of the winding trajectory of how I became a writer, which I haven't answered yet, but you keep going.
No, but I think the whole creative spark is like a writer, like you take those experiences, you take your perception, like with your grandmother. Right. That could give you a lot of material to work with, like the dynamics of that relationship.
And
then how you saw the earthquake, and then the decision you made to like, I want to be able to be able to contribute or pay it forward or be able to help people.
Exactly.
And then you can come back into the arts, because then you can end up realizing Well, art actually does help people.
Exactly. Yes, it does. I mean, you have your tech skills and you have your professional skill set. But what I notice is that you meld these things with your artistic drive that's obviously been with you almost all your life. And I did eventually, as I began, I practiced law in New York. And then when my husband died, I moved here to Maine and I became a consultant for nonprofits. And that was when the arts slowly began coming back to me. Yeah, I began realizing, you know what? There's something in the human condition that needs the arts. And I was hired eventually to be the interim executive director at the Portland Ballet here in Portland. Oh. And I was at my desk every day, helping them with this huge transition to a new chief executive officer. And every day I would hear the music from the Nutcracker on the other side of the wall as the ballet company rehearsed. And it brought back, I'm telling you, waves of memory. It wasn't just a few. I had to hold on to the desk some days saying, oh my God.
It must be great to be in that kind of environment. Like when you're in an environment that has that kind of artistry,
yes,
and it tends to, like, if you're listening to it, then you can feel it, and then you start to be able to channel your own creativity.
Absolutely. So I just had a talk with myself, and I said, it's time. You got to start writing about this. And my grandmother's influence is in my novella, and it's in the manuscript I'm working on. You're absolutely right.
So My Xanthi, is that how you say that?
It's a hard one for English speakers to pronounce. So Xanthi is fine. Xanthi. Greeks would say it Xanthi.
Xanthi. Okay.
Xanthi. Cool. And it's My Xanthi, and it's a novella about a Greek immigrant woman. And she's fictitious, but what I learned about the women in my life really permeates the novella.
Yeah, because you always bring that, as an artist, like if I'm writing a song, it's usually a combination of everything I've ever learned.
Right.
So it might be a little, jazz fusion in it. It might be some progressive rock in it. It might be some psychedelia. It might be some Beatle tones, or it is, but it's not like a copy. I'm not like sampling it. It's kind of my interpretation of whatever I actually kind of learned on or like. Then it tries to weave into the structure of what you do.
And is your music online somewhere where we can hear it?
Yeah, my music's all over the place. It's on Phantom Electric Ghost is my band, is my one-person band. It's on all the platforms. It's been out there for a while. I do a lot of experimental stuff on SoundCloud, and then I push the albums I think already out to like Apple and Spotify. So there's a bunch of stuff out there. I'm actually working on a new record. Been for like the last year and a half. I'm trying to craft something. Usually I used to put out 4 records a year.
Really?
Yeah, because I write a lot. And then I decided to focus on trying to create something with a specific theme. So I have tons of music from different sessions I'm trying to put into one thought. So I'm trying to organize it.
That's a challenge, huh?
Yeah. So it might end up pieces go to another project, pieces go. I have time to figure out what this project's going to be, but eventually it's going to come out sometime this year.
Fabulous. What would you say, if you don't mind my asking, what would you say your strongest musical influence is? There may not be just one, but.
Well, I like Sun Ra, which is an experimental jazz musician from the U.S., and I like Davis, and I like Prince. I like
Hendrix. You said that. And you like who?
Jimi Hendrix.
Sure.
So I'm kind of all over the map, but I also like Lou Reed and Bob Dylan from a lyrical context. So I look at like Lou Reed and Bob Dylan from their lyrical capabilities, and then I look at like Sun Ra or Coltrane or Hendrix and Prince in terms of musicianship.
Yes.
And Davis. So I like to look at different aspects of the art, because there's the art of the lyrics,
right,
and then there's the art of actually playing the instrument.
That's right.
And then piecing the song together, and then actually having a good the music theory, but just in practice, like putting together something that represents like a heartfelt emotion,
Yes.
or just a moment in time. I think it's like if you're in I don't know, like a stream of consciousness, but also something that speaks to you because it feels authentic. It feels like very vulnerable. That you're willing to have a happy accidents happen. That you're
Right.
willing to put your heart on your sleeve a little bit, and that's a hard place to be sometimes, because then you always second guess yourself as an artist, and
Right.
you have to figure out what are you going to put in the world, and what are you keeping for yourself.
When you say Davis, you mean Miles
Yeah,
Davis?
Miles Davis. Yeah,
Oh,
I love it. I like all his
oh,
phases, all the phases. I mean, the bebop phase, everybody purists love that. I like the fusion phase a lot,
yes. Yeah, yeah,
because I'm more experimental.
yeah,
But
yeah, it was.
you can't get to the fusion without him. He had to do the bebop first.
I hear you. Now you're reminding, well, first of all, I find him to be one of the most explosively important people in music. But okay, so we love Miles Davis. But when you talk about going through a phase that the purists might not like, that's part of what the recent film Complete Unknown was about.
Yeah,
About Bob
definitely.
Dylan.
I
Yeah.
love Dylan because I have like all his concerts.
Oh,
Like
really?
I had like almost all his bootlegs, like all his songs, like
Wow.
everything, like 10 hours of the stuff at Big Pink with the band. I got the
Okay.
10 hours of him in the basement with the band, right? But, but and so the idea when he went electric, people yelled like
Yes,
Judas.
exactly.
People that did not like it. And
That's right.
I love the fact that he was willing to just say, you know what, I don't believe you. I think his response on tape was, I don't believe you.
Yeah,
And he kept on going. And to
right.
me, it's kind of very punk rock, very punk aesthetic. To like he knew where he was. He didn't get run off and hide. He just like, I know where this is going to be. And the funny thing is, those songs, when he played them with the in 74, 75, like at a Rolling Thunder, everybody got it. But in like 66, 65, like people didn't get it. but
Yeah.
75, 74, people got it.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're not in your time. Like William Blake, I mean, people didn't find his poetry. It was in a barn.
Right.
They found the songs of innocence and the experience on these metal plates. But he felt like they were important enough to put on metal plates. So he etched
See?
them in acid with art on metal plates. Now I said that's when you believe in yourself, you put it
Right.
into you etch it into metal.
That's right. You etch it into metal, indeed. That's resilience right there. And it doesn't mean you're not afraid. It doesn't mean you don't have these qualms, but the ability to do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
That is phenomenal. And it's an enormous inspiration, particularly when, or at least I feel, particularly when you're doing something very quiet, when you're writing. You can self-censor. I know that you're already nodding, so I'm sure you know what I mean. You can self-censor very, very easily. And it's something I frankly struggle with a lot. Don't censor yourself before you've even tried to do this thing because you think there will be disapproval hanging in the background. Cut it out. Just do it. Do the work.
Yeah, it's
See
hard,
where it
to
takes
throw it
you.
at the wall because, well, not so much anymore because I can take my demos and I can throw them into a place like a SoundCloud.
Okay, right.
And I can see what my beta fans or my really hardcore super fans, if they like something or not. And whether or not I push it further and publish it to the wider
I
places.
see. Yeah,
But
of
so
course.
there are places where we can throw things as musicians out in the world, and we have more opportunity to direct to our audience without the middleman. We can actually go
Yes.
direct and push things out in a way that we couldn't like 10 years ago.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that, I think writers, you might still have to go through certain, I mean, I know you can self-publish. So there's
Right.
still like a lot of people have these tools now where you go on Amazon, you can push it out,
That's
so
right.
if you felt like you need to get it out, you could still get it out. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of like, what are you trying to hit?
Right. And now, if you've pushed your music out, I'm not as familiar as you are with this, but let's say you've pushed your music out. Does that preclude you're getting a deal with a company for an album?
No,
Not at all.
actually, I've actually
It
been
helps.
on small indie labels from the
Okay.
stuff I pushed out.
Got
Right?
it.
I've actually gotten picked up, like a Swedish label went and put out an EP I did. German label put some stuff out because I was putting stuff out on SoundCloud.
Right.
They some of these small labels or even big labels will go look in the underground
Gotcha.
areas of where we
Sure.
are, and
Sure.
they will go and say, "Hey, I like this thing that you did. But I got like all these songs. You'd be like this one, okay? So okay, I'll give you that one." As an artist, it's like I would let somebody. I read so much music. It's like, okay, I'll give you these 4 songs, and we'll see what you can do. It doesn't preclude me. I usually sign contracts where it's like I'm not exclusive with you. It's like you exclusively you can have this, but I can still work on that.
I see. It's a very different world. Yeah, I gotcha.
That's how
it's a very different world.
Yeah, it's a different world. I don't do exclusive like contract with people except for the stuff I give them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that because music it needs to be out there. I mean, if it's not reaching the ears of the people of other people,
it's like a painting that stays in your loft and you never send it to the gallery. Nobody ever sees it.
Right. I know. There's a little bit in kind of the literary world. There's a different kind of cultural tradition, or what I won't say it's cultural. There are a different set of rules often. For example, if you are submitting a story to a literary journal, which I've done many times, and I've been published in literary journals, they have to know that it's never been published anywhere else.
Oh, okay. They want that. They want to know that.
Yeah. And I see my website right down at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much. That's exactly where you go if you want to buy my book. And I also have an essay in an anthology on food, hunger, and family called Breaking Bread. And that is at the website too. Thank you, Keith, for putting that on there. Back to the journals. It's a very different set of rules. And I'm not dissing them. I'm just saying there is a sense that if you're coming to, let's say, a publisher, if you have a story collection, they will understand that you might have published some of those stories elsewhere, independently, singly. But you don't come with something that's been published elsewhere. You can't. No, you can't. Well, you can, but it's wildly rare.
That's not common.
Yeah, to go with, let's say, a self-published book. First of all, why would an agent, if you go to an agent with that, why would an agent represent you? She or he is going to have to go to a publishing house and ask them to buy it from you. And if it's already been available and published on Amazon, why are they going to do it? So there's a whole other, there's a whole other context.
A whole different level of things going on where they exclusive, like the publishing houses, I guess they want exclusive material.
Yeah, sure.
And they got a reason for it from a business aspect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they're publishing a print, something that's printed, they have certain fixed costs that are associated with that product and on and on. But the act of writing is in itself a real confrontation with yourself, isn't it? Some days.
Well, I think to write is that you have to be. It's like looking glass self. I have this idea from the Victorians, like the looking glass self. If you're a songwriter, you tend to reveal things that are pretty heavy, at least, unless you're just writing kind of fluff stuff.
Yes.
But you tend to, like, if I look at the writers I like, they reveal things that are kind of, when Bob Dylan was talking about his personal life on Blood on the Tracks, like when he's singing like Tangled Up in Blue.
Okay.
It's pretty heavy. He's going into, but he still did a lot of allegory. He still created a lot of separation, but it still was like the pain in it.
That's right.
And so he has this amazing talent to have these layered perspective, and he can shift perspective in the same song to multiple characters. But it's just the way he does it. It just makes people feel like, well, yeah, maybe that's how he should go about writing a song. Like if you want to tell a story, you see, like, Dylan a Springsteen, that you see these writers actually telling stories that resonate with the audience. It's not just a jingle. It actually means something.
That's right. That's right. And telling a story is, of course, one of the core obligations of the writer. I mean, sometimes you do something very atmospheric that isn't really a story from beginning, middle, end. But often you are telling a story somehow, some way. And when I wrote my book, My Xanthi, I wasn't sure at the beginning, Keith, exactly which story I was going to tell. Mm-hmm. I knew, it was interesting, what I heard was narrative voices first. I heard very strongly the heavily Greek accented voice of an immigrant woman who was resonant of many of the women I grew up with. And I was bilingual as a very small child. So I could speak to them in Greek, which was my first language technically, and in English. And so we communicated at that time, once again, across the boundary of language.
Yeah. So and we have some depth. Because if you can get that cross-culture, cross-language, and you say things in Greek that maybe have a different perspective than if you say it in English.
Right. I mean, there's a scene in the book that is taken from real life where the immigrant woman who is the main character asks the family with whom she's living in the United States now. She has come over to help with the family whose mom is quite ill. And there's a bowl of peaches on the family table. And she says in Greek to the family, what's the English word for this fruit? What do you call this thing? And this is for real, we said peach. That's a peach. And she said, bits? Bits? Which in Greek means, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't compute.
She thought that was the ugliest word she'd ever heard. Of course, the way she said it was vile. But she said in Greek, glossa inafti. You call that a language?
And she didn't like it.
And that was like a lot of the old Greek gals I grew up with. It was interesting, though they were deeply committed to their families assimilating to this country. They had a little bit of contempt for the sound of English. They thought Greek was much more beautiful.
But yeah, they think like your mother tongue.
Of course,
you're going to have a lot more love for it.
Absolutely.
It's a cultural thing. It's connecting it to your grandparents, to your great grandparents, to your whole family structure. And there's a lot of depth to it.
Right. I mean, as a musician, you know this. You don't pick sounds randomly.
No, it's like there's always a reason why you pick it.
And it resonates or it doesn't. And there can be a real subtle difference between it being the right one and the wrong one. Yeah. And,
sound is super important in like the intention. I mean, I lived in Japan for 2 years.
Really?
And had to learn. I had a sensei. I was like, it was like the UN. When I was working in this financial institution, I had a headphone. I had a translator, interpreter sat with me every day.
Oh, wow.
I was working for like this insurance company.
Oh, my goodness.
And I started to realize that translating English documents into Japanese and Japanese into English wasn't working that great.
No.
Because the Japanese documents were super small compared to ours. Because the way they wrote was a lot more assumptions, and the way the language is kind of like, if you look at kanjis and you look at the structure of Japanese language, it's more pictograph. It actually represents like ideas, like in a kind of picture. Yes. And so it's like the Chinese language is the same thing. Hiragana, katakana, they're all like that. And so there's a lot of meaning in the symbols.
Yes.
And sometimes the symbols can speak a lot more than what our words are. They can represent a lot more words than and I started realizing that. So, we need to actually use like flow charts to show the logic of what we were doing, because they could understand that, and there was more pictures. And so then we could get the Japanese and English on the same page, because we're using flowcharts and symbols that they respected. There was this language, like this tech language, they was using symbols that the Japanese recognized, this thing called a UML. And they recognized it as a logical thing, like a math type thing. So I said, well, if we use that, then we'll get agreement instead of people trying to say, what are you trying to say in English versus what are you trying to say in Japanese? There was like a disconnect. And so like the language thing became really interesting to me is that those dynamics is like, language is really
huge. It's huge. Which is why being a translator of an artistic work is such a mountain climb. You don't just, it's not a simple transliteration from one cultural expression to the next. It's enormous. And when I was in college, I was studying Spanish literature, and I fell in love with Garcia Lorca's poetry, and I would read it in Spanish. And some of the English translations were just beautiful, just glorious. But there was nothing like the sound of this. Oh,
yeah. Sometimes I like to watch foreign films, and I don't have them. I just have the subtitles on. I don't want it like I watch a lot of Japanese and Korean in Korean language or in Japanese language, and just have it. I don't want it, dubbed. I don't like the dub. I like to hear the actor actually speak it in the language, because you're gonna miss. Acting is about how you say the line, right?
And it's about it's what you don't say too. By the way,
it's the nonverbal stuff. And if you're just getting this kind of voiceover, you ruin it. It's like I need to actually have it in its original language.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for a polymath like yourself, who probably, you have a lot of layers to the way that I'm gathering, to the way that you interact with the world. And makes all the sense in the world to me, what you just said. This was one of the challenges in writing my novella, My Xanthi. Meaning, a lot of it comes through the letters that the main character wrote. She's dead by the time this book opens.
Oh, wow. So it's like letters she wrote in the past?
Correct. And I had to write them as though they had been written in Greek and translated into English.
So you had to have a double level of translation.
Right. Yes.
Or triple level.
Yeah, right. The story is that this lawyer in California, he's modeled very, very much after some people in my family, has been challenged by his teenage daughter about his work. This is a lawyer who is an anti-death penalty advocate and defends death penalty cases. So he is committed to that kind of work, which is very hard work. And there are people in my family who are exactly like that. And his teenage daughter comes to him one day and says, "Dad, how can you defend those people?" And he knows he has to answer her, because it's a really deep question from a teenager to her father. So he knows that there is something he's got to read before he answers her. And what he has to read is a stack of letters that somebody sent to him without a return address, and he knows who it is. And it's his old nanny, Xanthi's letters. She came to the United States back in the 50s and 60s to help raise him as a child in the Midwest. And she escaped the Greek Civil War, this was after the Greek Civil War, to do this. She came to the United States to support her family back home. It's a very common immigrant story.
Yeah.
But in this case, what he does is he knows that he's got to read her letters, because she is the one who taught him something about injustice and why you don't walk away from it. And so it's a kind of dual narrative between him all night long saying, "I'm going to read all these letters before my daughter gets up in the morning so I can answer her the best I know how."
With a really good example of a family interpretation of what justice and injustice is.
Right. And I don't know if he's looking for an answer. I know he's looking for something that she taught him.
That she said he's trying to remember or find.
Yes. And so there he is looking at these letters, and the memories of her are absolutely overwhelming him, and how much he adored her, and how different she was from the rest of the family. Talk about love across boundaries, right?
That's awesome. I can see that kind of like how that could be done in film.
Oh boy.
I'm already kind of like getting a cinematic view of getting into the letters and getting the playback of scenes of how things that happened. And you're talking about the war she left from the Civil War, and I can kind of picture that. So I'm already getting all this stuff.
Great. I'll tell you, I would love to have this thing made into a film, because I see it that way too. I see him with the lamp on at his desk all night long in California, going through these pages and having to get up and breathe because the memories are almost too much for him. And then there she is in her voice, talking about how hard it was to come across an ocean with her 2 suitcases, that's it, through Ellis Island. She came as an immigrant who had all her teeth removed by the authorities because she had decay. This I saw with my own eyes as a child, because we had a woman who came and visit and stayed with us for some years who was like this. But what I wrote is fictionalized, okay? So let me be clear. And I saw that she came without teeth to the United States and was there at Union Station in Chicago wearing black, 2 suitcases on the curb. And my mom, with us 3 kids in the back, came to pick her up. And here's this incredible woman hiding her mouth and saying hello. And my mother is outraged at what they did to her. How could they send this woman across or remove all of her teeth and then just leave her that way?
Yeah, they should have, like, where's the humanity and like,
where's the humanity in that?
Yeah, so, not thinking to fix it.
But this is how it was in those days. I don't even know who removed the teeth, whether they were Greeks or here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she came through Ellis Island. And the first thing my parents did was get her a set of false teeth. And so she had pictures taken smiling. And
must have got happy that she was able to go to the dentist and actually get the service.
Yeah. And so there she was in this culture that she did not understand. And you walk through her view of the culture she's in and the lawyer narrator's view of what she seemed like to him. And she is writing back to her daughter in Greece saying, do you realize these people wash their clothes with machines? What is this about? I don't trust it. I don't trust these machines to do the right thing. And then they go through the whole shot of, she learns about that. She learns about she has to wear deodorant. Okay. Because the lady of the house insists that she wear deodorant. And Xanthi writes back to her daughter and says, I don't know what's wrong with these people, but you got to put this stuff under your arms. Okay, I'll do it because they want me to.
Culture, so the cultural aspect, that all the little things end up being big things.
I know, and some of it is very funny because she does not understand why your nose is so sensitive about.
Yeah, because maybe if you're in a society where nobody's doing that, then that's the norm.
Right. But then it gets deeper. And she starts living with the family through illnesses. She starts living with the family through the cultural upheaval of the 1960s. She watches TV footage of Bull Connor and his hoses.
Oh, yeah.
This vile thing. And she saw what was happening. And she said, she writes to her daughter, I don't know why this society isn't falling. I don't know why. I'm terrified for these people. What do they think is going to happen to them? And she keeps going through these things. And finally, through a series of events, she sees the father of the family confront some injustices that he does not want to represent. He's a lawyer. And the narrator understands that Xanthi has lines that she will not cross. And then come the letters where she's saying goodbye to the narrator, who is at that point a 14-year-old boy in the Chicago suburbs. And here the two images come together. Here's the grown man in his office reading these letters, almost weeping. And here is this Greek woman having endured these secrets, these grim wartime secrets in the Greek Civil War, saying goodbye to this teenage boy. And he has started to hear her as a teenager screaming in her sleep because she knows she's going back to Greece. And he has the chutzpah to ask her, Mrs. Xanthi, why are you screaming in your sleep? And she says, you really want to know? And she tells him what happened during the war.
Oh, wow. So you have a flashback to the war.
And you have this flashback to what happened to her husband and her daughter. And it's very bad. And then she leaves for the airport. And here's this teenage boy that the older man now is remembering, left with this reality that this woman had never shared with him until she left. And then there's a plot turn that twists that even further that I am not going to tell anybody about.
Want to read the book. You
Right.
don't want to give it all away. Really.
Exactly. Read the book. And so our lawyer narrator realizes as he reads through these letters that there was even more he didn't know about her. And he realizes that truth and trust have less to do with love than even he thought. And he's seen some bad dudes. He's represented some bad dudes. And his wife walks in on him and says, what's the matter with you? And he says, I read these letters and it's upended me. And she said, do you really think that everybody you love tells you the truth? Really?
Yeah, well, the people you love, sometimes they want to protect you from the truth.
And I won't tell you the rest because the resolution is in the book. But it's really kind of a double story, even a triple story, as you begin to understand things about the Greek Civil War, which I had to research because my family didn't talk about it.
Yeah, people don't like to talk about the bad things, so we have to go back and reconstruct it in your own research to figure out what's going on.
That's
right. If you want to get the oral history from your great-grandparents.
Did you do that at all? Did you get oral history?
Yeah, actually, I got some from some of my grandparents.
Okay.
And some of the things that they went through.
Okay.
Like my great-grandpa, he was a coal miner. He was in some coal mining explosions in West Virginia. I learned about some things about him in his life. But it's like sometimes you have to go to your uncles and your aunts and get the stories about like what they went through.
That's right.
And sometimes they don't want to tell it. And then when get to a certain age, you might be able to get it out of them.
I know. Maybe.
Maybe you can get something out of them. And it's that oral history is so important. And then you wonder, like, well, how much of this are they kind of reimagining?
Right.
But some of it like feels like really authentic. So,
Right. Well, memory is a funny thing, Keith. There are many people who believe that memory is a constant reinvention. You and I would not, if we saw something that happened yesterday and we saw it at the same time in the same place, we might not remember it the same way.
Yeah, witnesses always say the different things.
Exactly. I mean, my dad, among many, many other lawyers, he taught courses in law school, and he did what others did. They hired actors to burst into the lecture, one with a toy gun and one without. I mean, I don't know if you could even do that nowadays, but something that was plastic, and run through the lecture hall and disappear. And then everybody was asked, what did you see? What
did you see? Yeah. It's an experiment. Yeah.
And it was so wildly divergent. It's a lesson.
Who did you see? Like, who did you see?
Right.
Like, the person you saw, the description is not even the person. Once you get them there, it's like, that's not the person that was doing it.
That's right. Which is an object lesson in eyewitness testimony. which is not necessarily so great. You'd think it would be the sine qua non of testimony.
Yeah, well, that's why you got defense attorneys. They go to bat because it's like a belief of like, and even if you have somebody like everybody has a right to a defense, and so it's like the idea of the right to defend every person in a society, civil society, and so like a defense attorney believes that, and that's why they're doing it. Versus
That's
like
why
being a prosecutor, like where a prosecutor might have a mindset, well, that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, absolutely, yeah, and I respect them both. Even though everybody in my family except me, my mother was gone by this time, but my brothers and my dad were all criminal defense attorneys. My brothers still are. They do. One does white collar criminal defense, and one does death penalty defense. Still, I was a civil lawyer, so I never did criminal law. But the commitment to navigating this process the best way you know how, because there's a warm human being here who is at stake, whether it's a person that you're prosecuting somebody else for, or whether it's a person whom you're defending. You're talking about real life people.
Yeah, you want to give them the best,
absolutely,
your best effort to.
That's right.
Don't phone it in.
Don't phone it in, right? Exactly.
If you believe it, like you're in that kind of like life and death, like with the death penalty cases, or the people that are in that kind of situation with the criminal.
That's right.
Like, and you don't know, like, was the person framed, or is the person being overcharged?
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of it is like. Can they get the justice? Are they going to do the time that really represents what happened? Right. Correct. Or are they going to get the justice they deserve?
That's right.
From both sides,
It's not an easy proposition. We all know that the legal system is deeply flawed. If you've got money and the ability to get a certain kind of representation, you stand in a different posture from someone who does not.
Yeah, and you can steal a Twinkie and then get stuck in jail, where somebody can steal $1 million and it takes 2 years to get them into the front of the court.
We could go down this road big time.
It's like that happens.
Chief.
Like,
and it does happen. It doesn't just. It's not a hypothetical. It's the book is not about. The novella is really about the people behind these stories. It's about love and across cultures, as you've mentioned. By the way, it has appealed to people who are not Greek. By the way, I have had people, right? Yeah, I hope so. Is right. I've had people say, you know what, that business of having a real strong desire to assimilate into the American culture, and then being very aware that you're losing something by doing that and gaining something, and having people who came from the old world culture in your face and kind of inspiring you some different kind of connection. I've had people of Chinese extraction say that to me.
It's a melting pot story, because the whole idea of the melting pot is like, do you really want to melt?
Right. That's the question.
Like, maybe it shouldn't be. There was somebody on talking about, like, shouldn't be a melting pot. It should be like a fruit salad, where your individual aspects of the fruit are still there.
That's right.
That you don't lose it. Where the idea of like some dominant culture eliminating whatever the subordinate culture is an older idea. It's not actually where the more united that is, like where we are today. You could see that maybe there's room to negotiate on that.
Yeah. It's a big issue. I mean, instead of obliterating difference, how about relishing it? And how about honoring it? That fruit salad thing is, a great image. And it's part of, I think it's part of what I'd love for people to take away from my work, actually, is to say, this is not a choice of one thing is better than the other thing. And by that, I mean a lot of stuff. I mean the language that's in the book. the language in which Xanthi speaks, and it's very funny because she thinks English is but ugly, and yet, here we are, we're reading this book in English, which is what is a very rich language. But I already mentioned that I want you to be able to read her letters and really hear that she's not a native speaker.
Yeah, so you have that different perspective, which is really important to hear her voice.
Exactly. So what I did there is that in her letters, which keep coming back, is you hear a different rhythm. You hear a different cadence in her speech. She has sayings that she uses that are not regular English sayings. And you begin to understand, I get it.
It's a Greek culture coming out.
Yeah, that's her. I would like you to welcome that, and to welcome reading this book, her age and experience versus the age and experience of the lawyer, and the commitment to one another, and the different ways they see love, and the different ways they see justice.
Well, I think it's great when you get into a book, it's a journey.
Yeah.
That you get brought into a world, you get brought into that story.
I hope so.
But in a world where people are just looking at TikToks and Instagram, they have the commitment to actually get into a story and get pulled into it.
Yes, and I hope that this one goes quickly enough, because it's a novella, meaning it's shorter than a full-length novel. Mm-hmm. This will draw you in, I believe, and you can start accelerating through that story, I would say, in 2 sittings. I don't think this is.
Well, that's the way things are today. We have to be able to hook people into our art,
right?
And be able to keep them in the art.
Right.
It's super important.
That's right.
There's so much out there, but this story to me is like, it's really relevant. There's a lot of people. This whole world is very multicultural. We're in the age of globalization. I deal with people overseas every day in my job.
I bet.
With different accents, different cultures, different perspectives. And what you say sometimes in English doesn't resonate because they have a different language.
Correct.
And what they say, I don't understand because they're coming from a different language. So you have to have these conversations and an understanding, and maybe a level of patience that certain people might not have.
Right. But what a gift when you try. What a gift. You get back things that you just never expected, because you know what? You didn't come into the conversation with them. And somebody did you the honor of saying, this is how my culture sees it. And you can walk away with really rich stuff. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's awesome to have the whole idea, like with your book, is, I'll bring it up again, is like love across culture, love across boundaries. And so many people want to build walls.
Oh, no.
Build boundaries today, and we're kind of shifting back to the 40s.
Let's not do that. Yeah.
You don't want to do that. It's like we're in the 21st century. We're on the cusp of a lot of really cool things that can happen, but we have a way of, as human beings, by not learning our history, by not understanding other people, not listening, listening to listening to her story, like within the family, and hearing a different voice.
Yes.
And then you having that voice to be able to, get his daughter to understand like why he's doing what he's doing.
Right.
That's important to not, you have a point of view. So I do it because I say I do it. Or you could say, well, I'm going to go and show you a family story and give you a reason.
And that woman's story, that Greek woman's voice, then resonates down through generations.
Yeah.
And isn't that what we all want for
It's better than the
ourselves?
Top down, because I said so.
Yeah, because I told you, right? Well, I am so glad that, look at all the things that I've learned from you tonight about the things that you do and how you put your music together. This is just delightful. I'm so glad I met you, Keith.
Well, I'm glad to meet you. This is why I love to do the show, because we get to talk to people with different perspectives all over the world, different types of creative people that the audience can dive in, and then get an example so they can go to your website and pick up your book. That'll be fully clickable, as I say, when you click on that. Right now you can't click on it, but like we're live on Facebook, live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube. But then the description of this podcast, that link is a URL that's clickable.
Great.
And we will be on all the other podcast channels where you can listen to or watch a podcast, like Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon by tomorrow. And we'll create a landing page and people can just pick whatever platform they like.
Wonderful.
You don't have to pick, you don't have to be forced to deal with it on one or the other. You can choose whatever ones you like. And I do want to appreciate the time that you took to be here on the show tonight. And I hope everybody will actually go in and dive into your story and dive into the book, because I think what we've been talking about is really interesting. So I think that's why we try to bring cool content to people that they maybe weren't thinking about, and now you have something that you can go check out and experience.
Oh, thank you. And I'm going to check out your music too. So there.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, have a good night.
You do the same, Keith.